Tonight, we're going to travel together through thousands of years of human history. We're going to discover something remarkable, something hidden in plain sight. 9 ancient agreements, 9 invisible contracts that were made long before you were born, long before your grandparents were born. Agreements that still control how you live, how you work, how you think about success, and how you measure your own worth. These aren't written in any book you can hold. They aren't taught in schools, yet they govern nearly everything. And here's what makes this fascinating, what makes this worth understanding as you drift toward sleep. These agreements were created by people just like you, people who wanted control, people who understood human psychology, people who knew exactly how to shape behavior across generations, across centuries. So settle in, let your body relax, and let's begin this journey together. If you find value in this exploration, if these insights resonate with your ambitions, consider subscribing to this channel so you can continue discovering the hidden patterns of power, influence, and human behavior. Now, let us begin. The first agreement: you must obey the king. Our story begins in ancient Mesopotamia, around 4,000 years ago. The sun rises over the Tigris River, casting long shadows across mud brick buildings. And in the center of the city, there stands a palace. Inside that palace, a man sits on a throne. He is not stronger than other men, not smarter, not faster, but everyone obeys him. Why? This is where our first ancient agreement was born, the agreement of hierarchical authority. Before cities existed, before civilization, humans lived in small groups, tribes of maybe 50 to 100 people, and in these tribes, leadership was fluid, earned through wisdom, strength, or simply age. But something changed when cities formed. Suddenly, thousands of people lived together, and someone realized something profound, something that would echo through all of human history. They realized that if you could convince people that one person had the divine right to rule, that authority came from the gods themselves. You could organize massive numbers of humans to do extraordinary things. Think about the psychology here. As you relax deeper into comfort, a farmer in ancient Babylon wakes up every morning, works the fields, gives a portion of his harvest to the king's collectors, and he does this willingly. Why? Because he believes, truly believes, that the king speaks for the gods. The disobedience isn't just breaking a rule. It's a spiritual transgression, a cosmic crime. This is brilliant and terrifying. The agreement was simple. You must obey the king, because the king is chosen by forces greater than us all. And once this agreement took hold, once it lived in the minds of millions, it became real. More real than the mud bricks of the palace. More powerful than any army, because an army can be defeated. But an idea, an agreement that lives in the collective consciousness, that controls behavior even when no one is watching. This is the first lesson of power. True power doesn't come from force, it comes from belief. The ancient kings understood this. They built massive temples, not just to honor gods, but to remind everyone, every single day, that authority was sacred, unchangeable, eternal. And this agreement, this first ancient contract, it still controls you today. Oh, it looks different now. We don't call them kings, we call them presidents, CEOs, directors, managers. But the agreement remains. You must obey those above you in the hierarchy. You feel it when you go to work, when you follow rules you didn't create, when you defer to authority figures, even when you disagree. The ancient Mesopotamians would recognize this pattern immediately. They would see our corporate structures, our government bureaucracies, our military ranks, and they would nod knowingly. Yes, they might say, this is what we created. This agreement still lives. A thought experiment. You as the authority now. Let me place you in a situation, right here, right now. Imagine, tomorrow morning, you wake up, and you've been given complete authority over a team of 50 people. Not because you earned it through merit, not because you're the smartest or most capable, but simply because the organization has designated you as the leader. These 50 people, they have families, mortgages, dreams, ambitions, and they will obey you because the hierarchical structure says they must. You can assign them tasks, you can evaluate their performance, you can determine their futures within the organization. Feel this for a moment. The weight of it, the possibility of it. What would you do with this authority? Here's the fascinating part. The part that reveals the true nature of this ancient agreement. You have 3 choices. 3 paths you could take. The first path, you could use this authority benevolently. You could be the kind of leader you wish you had. You could listen, empower, serve those beneath you, make decisions that genuinely benefit everyone. This feels noble, feels right, feels like the moral choice. And it is, to a degree, but notice something. Even in this benevolent use of authority, the hierarchy remains intact. You still have power they don't have. You still make final decisions. They still obey. The structure persists, even when wielded kindly. The second path, you could use this authority for pure self-interest. You could extract maximum value from these 50 people. Advance your own career. Build your own reputation. Use them as stepping stones to higher positions. This feels wrong, feels exploitative, feels like what we criticize in bad leaders. But here's the uncomfortable truth. This is how most hierarchies actually function. People climb by using their authority over others, by optimizing for their own advancement, by playing the hierarchical game skillfully. And the system rewards this, promotes this, makes this the rational choice if you want to accumulate more authority. The third path, and this is the most interesting, you could attempt to dissolve the hierarchy itself. You could say to your team, "We're equals. We'll make decisions collectively. My title means nothing. We work together as peers." This feels revolutionary, feels liberating, feels like breaking the ancient agreement. But watch what happens. The organization above you, they don't recognize this. They still hold you accountable. They still expect you to deliver results, to manage performance, to maintain control, your team. They might feel confused, uncertain, because the agreement is so deep. They've been conditioned to need hierarchy, to want clear authority, to feel uncomfortable without structure. And practically, when decisions need to be made quickly, when conflict arises, when accountability is required, the absence of hierarchy creates chaos, paralysis, inefficiency. So even your attempt to break the agreement reveals how deeply embedded it is, how necessary it seems, how difficult it is to function without it. The tool, understanding your position in hierarchies. Here's how you use this ancient agreement as a tool, rather than being used by it. First, recognize that you exist in multiple hierarchies simultaneously. Work hierarchies, social hierarchies, family hierarchies, intellectual hierarchies. In each one, you have a position, above some people, below others, equal to some. Your position determines your power, your influence, your ability to shape outcomes. Now, here's the key insight. Most people unconsciously accept their position. They assume the hierarchy is fixed, natural, unchangeable. But hierarchies are constantly being negotiated, constantly shifting, constantly open to reinterpretation. When you're below someone in the hierarchy, you have 2 tools. You can master the art of strategic obedience, appearing to follow while actually influencing, shaping the authority figure's decisions through careful presentation of information, framing of options, management of perception. The best subordinates aren't the most obedient, they're the most strategic. They make their superiors dependent on them, indispensable. And through this dependency, they gain real power, even without formal authority. Or you can work to change your position, to climb, to accumulate authority, by demonstrating value, building alliances, creating results that demand recognition. When you're above someone in the hierarchy, you have different tools. You can use your authority to create loyalty, to build a team that's genuinely committed to you, not because they must obey, but because you've made it in their interest to support you. This is rare, but powerful. It transforms hierarchical authority into genuine influence. Or, you can use your authority to create other people's authority, to elevate those beneath you, to build their capabilities, their confidence, their power. This seems counterintuitive, giving away authority, but it actually multiplies your influence because you become surrounded by capable people who credit you with their growth. The deeper tool, the one that changes everything. Recognize that all hierarchies are ultimately based on belief, on agreement, on collective acceptance. They feel solid, permanent, real. But they're not. They're stories, maintained through constant reinforcement, through symbols, rituals, language, behavior, and stories can be rewritten. Not easily, not without cost, not without resistance, but they can be changed. When you see hierarchy as an ancient agreement rather than natural law, you gain the ability to navigate it consciously, to use it strategically, to bend it toward your purposes. You stop being a passive participant, reacting to authority, and become an active player, understanding the game, playing it skillfully, or choosing to play a different game entirely. This is the power of seeing the first ancient agreement clearly. It doesn't disappear, but it loses some of its invisible control over you. And in that space, that small gap between automatic obedience and conscious choice, lies genuine freedom. As you drift towards sleep, consider this. What hierarchies control your life? Where do you sit in each one? And what would change if you stopped accepting your position as fixed, as natural, as inevitable? What authority could you accumulate? What influence could you build? What hierarchy could you reshape if you played the game consciously, strategically? The first ancient agreement gave us civilization, organization, the ability to coordinate millions of humans toward common goals, but it also gave us oppression, exploitation, the crushing of individual potential beneath institutional weight. Both are true. Both are real. Both exist simultaneously. Your task, as an ambitious person, as someone seeking genuine power, is to extract the benefits while minimizing the costs, to use hierarchy when it serves you, to resist it when it constrains you, and to build your own authority, not for domination, but for freedom. This is the paradox. You gain freedom from hierarchy by mastering hierarchy, by understanding it so completely that you can move within it fluidly like water, taking the shape that serves your purpose, flowing around obstacles, finding paths that others don't see. The ancient Mesopotamians created this agreement, but you don't have to be bound by it. Not completely, not unconsciously, not anymore. The second agreement, your worth equals your wealth. Let's move forward in time to ancient Athens, around 500 years before the Common Era. The marketplace bustles with activity. Merchants display their wares. Philosophers debate in the shadows of columns, and at the edge of the agora, two men stand together. One wears fine robes, purple-dyed fabric that cost more than most people earn in a year. The other wears simple wool, clean, but plain. They might have the same intelligence, the same wisdom, the same capacity for virtue. But only one has political power. Only the wealthy man can vote, can hold office, can shape the future of Athens. This is where the second ancient agreement crystallized. Your worth as a human being is measured by your wealth. Now, the Greeks didn't invent this idea completely, but they formalized it. They turned it into a system, into democracy itself. And here's the psychological genius and the tragedy of this agreement. In earlier tribal societies, status came from many sources: courage in hunting, wisdom in counsel, skill in healing, strength in protecting the group. But as societies grew larger, as cities formed, something remarkable happened. People needed a universal measure, a single metric to determine who mattered, who had value, who deserved power. And wealth became that measure, not because it was the best measure, not because it captured human worth accurately, but because it was simple, quantifiable, impossible to fake. You couldn't pretend to be wealthy in ancient Athens. Everyone could see your home, your clothing, your possessions. Wealth became the ultimate social proof. Think about the psychology of the poor man in Athens, the one who cannot vote, who cannot shape his own government. Despite being a free citizen, he works. He contributes to society. He may be brilliant, kind, brave, but the agreement tells him, and everyone around him, that he lacks worth. Not just political worth, fundamental human worth. This agreement gets inside your head. It changes how you see yourself, how you see others. It creates a simple equation. Wealth equals worth, and therefore, pursuing wealth becomes pursuing worth itself. This is why this agreement is so powerful, so enduring. It doesn't need to be enforced. It enforces itself through shame, through envy, through the constant social calculations we all make. Fast forward to today, as you lie here, relaxing into deeper comfort. This agreement hasn't weakened, it's strengthened. We measure success by income, by net worth, by the visible symbols of wealth. A person's value in modern society, their influence, their voice, their power, often correlates directly with their wealth. We know this is incomplete. We know human worth is more complex, more nuanced, but the agreement runs deep. Programmed into us by thousands of years of reinforcement. You feel it when you check your bank account, when you compare yourself to others, when you wonder if you're successful enough. The ancient Athenians created this metric, this agreement, and it still controls how billions of humans measure themselves and each other. A thought experiment, the wealth paradox. Now, imagine this scenario and really let yourself feel it. Tomorrow, you wake up and discover that you've inherited $10 million, completely unexpected, completely unearned, just pure luck, random fortune. $10 million in liquid assets, immediately accessible, yours to do with as you please. Take a moment and notice what happens in your body, in your mind. When you imagine this, there's probably excitement, relief, a sense of possibility expanding, freedom increasing. But notice something deeper, something more subtle. Don't you also feel, in some small way, more valuable, more worthy, more legitimate, more deserving of respect, even though you did nothing to earn this wealth? Even though it's purely random, the number itself changes how you feel about yourself. This is the second ancient agreement, operating at a visceral level. Now, the fascinating part. What would you do with this $10 million? And here's where it gets psychologically interesting, where the agreement reveals its true power. Option 1. You could keep it all. Invest it conservatively. Live off the returns. Never work again. Enjoy pure freedom, pure leisure, pure pleasure. This sounds appealing. This is what many people say they'd do. But notice what happens psychologically. Within a few months, maybe a year, you'd probably start to feel empty, purposeless, adrift. Because humans need meaning, need challenge, need growth, and wealth without purpose, without creation, without contribution, actually diminishes your sense of worth. Despite the agreement saying the opposite. This is the paradox. The agreement says wealth equals worth. But wealth alone, without achievement, without struggle, without earned status, actually feels hollow. Option 2. You could use it to start a business, to build something, to create value, to take risks, to potentially multiply it, or lose it all. This feels more meaningful, more aligned with ambition, more satisfying to the deep parts of your psychology. But notice, in this scenario, the wealth isn't actually making you feel worthy. It's the building, the creating, the struggling that generates that feeling. The money is just a tool, enabling the real source of worth, which is achievement, growth, overcoming challenges. Option 3. You could give it all away, to effective charities, to causes you believe in, to people who need it more than you. This sounds noble, altruistic, morally superior. But be honest, really honest, would you actually do this? Probably not. Because the agreement is too strong, the psychological pull of wealth is too powerful. Even knowing intellectually that giving it away might create more good in the world, most people couldn't overcome the feeling that wealth, even unearned wealth, represents worth, security, status, power. Option 4. And this is the most interesting. You could use it strategically to buy freedom, to invest in your own development, to create optionality, to build leverage, not hoarding it, not spending it mindlessly, but deploying it as a tool to reshape your life, your capabilities, your position in the world. This is what sophisticated people do with wealth. They don't worship it. They don't display it. They use it as a means to other ends. But notice, even this approach still accepts the fundamental agreement that wealth equals power, equals access, equals worth in the eyes of others. The tool, decoupling worth from wealth. Here's how you use this ancient agreement as a tool, rather than being used by it. First, accept a hard truth. In the world as it currently exists, wealth does equal power, does equal access, does equal influence. This isn't fair. It isn't morally right. It isn't how things should be, but it is how things are. The second ancient agreement is deeply embedded in every system, every institution, every social interaction. Fighting this reality, pretending it doesn't exist, refusing to engage with it. That doesn't make you noble. It makes you powerless. So, accept it. Understand it. Use it. First tool, pursue wealth strategically, not as an end, but as a means. Recognize that accumulating wealth gives you leverage, optionality, freedom to make choices that others can't make. It lets you say no to things that don't serve you, yes to opportunities that others can't access. It buys time, space, independence. But, and this is crucial, don't let the pursuit of wealth become your identity, your measure of self-worth, your primary source of meaning. Wealth is a tool. Powerful, useful, important, but still just a tool. Use it. Don't be used by it. Second tool, develop alternative sources of worth that aren't tied to wealth. Skills, knowledge, relationships, character, creativity, contribution, impact. These things are harder to measure, harder to compare, harder to display, but they're more real, more enduring, more genuinely satisfying than wealth alone. The ancient Athenians were wrong. Worth doesn't equal wealth. Worth is multidimensional, complex, personal, subjective. But you have to actively cultivate these other dimensions, because the agreement won't do it for you. The agreement will constantly pull you back to the simple metric, the easy comparison, the wealth scorecard. Third tool, recognize the wealth game has rules, and you can choose which rules to play by. There's the traditional wealth game. Accumulate money through employment, save diligently, invest conservatively, retire comfortably. This works. It's stable, it's safe, and it's also slow, limiting, designed to benefit institutions more than individuals. Then there's the entrepreneurial wealth game. Create value. Capture a portion of that value. Scale. Take risks. Potentially achieve exponential returns. This is faster, more exciting, more dangerous, and requires different skills, different psychology, different tolerance for uncertainty. Then there's the leverage wealth game. Use other people's money, other people's time, other people's skills to multiply your own efforts. This is how the truly wealthy operate. They don't trade time for money. They orchestrate systems, own assets, control resources. Each game has different rules, different timelines, different probabilities of success. Most people don't even realize they're choosing a game. They just play the default, the employment game, the safe game. But you, as an ambitious person, you can choose consciously which game to play, which rules to follow, which strategy to employ. Fourth tool, and this is the most powerful. Use wealth to buy freedom from the wealth agreement itself. This is the ultimate paradox, the ultimate leverage. If you can accumulate enough wealth, deploy it strategically enough, you can reach a point where you no longer need to signal wealth, compete for status, prove your worth through material display. You can opt out, not because you're poor, but because you're secure. This is true wealth. Not the number in your account, but the psychological freedom, the independence from the agreement, the ability to measure yourself by your own standards. Very few people reach this point, because they keep moving the goalposts, keep finding new wealth targets, keep playing the game even after they've won. But those who do, who recognize when they have enough, who use wealth to buy freedom rather than status, they've mastered the second ancient agreement. They've turned it from a prison into a tool, into a ladder they can climb, and then kick away. As you drift deeper into sleep, ask yourself, how much wealth do you actually need to live the life you want, to have the freedom you crave, to pursue the projects that matter? Not how much would feel good, not how much would impress others, not how much would prove your worth, but how much actually, functionally. And once you reach that number, that real number, what changes? Do you keep playing the wealth game because the agreement is too strong to escape, or do you shift, redirect your energy, pursue other forms of worth, other types of power, other sources of meaning? The ancient Athenians tied political power to wealth, created a system where worth and wealth were inseparable. We inherited that system, amplified it, made it global, universal, inescapable. But on an individual level, in your own life, in your own psychology, you can begin to separate them, not completely, not easily, not without the world still judging you by its metrics, but internally, in your own sense of self, in your own measure of what matters. You can create distance. You can accumulate wealth without being defined by it. You can recognize its power without worshiping it. You can use it strategically without letting it use you. This is mastery of the second ancient agreement. Not rejection, not acceptance, but conscious, strategic, sophisticated engagement. The agreement exists, will continue to exist, will shape how the world treats you, but it doesn't have to shape how you treat yourself. And that difference, that small gap between external measurement and internal knowing, that's where your real worth lies, not in your bank account, not in your possessions, not in your status, but in your capabilities, your character, your choices, your contributions. The ancient agreement says wealth equals worth. The truth, the deeper truth, is that worth is something you define, something you create, something you earn through who you become, not what you accumulate. Wealth is power, that's undeniable. But worth, true worth, that's something else entirely. And ambitious people, truly ambitious people, pursue both, but never confuse them. The third agreement, your time belongs to someone else. We journey now to ancient Egypt, to the time of the Great Pyramids. Imagine standing in the desert, the sun blazing overhead, and before you, thousands of workers moving massive stones, constructing something that will last millennia. These workers, they don't own their time. From sunrise to sunset, their hours belong to the pharaoh, to the state, to something larger than themselves. This is the third ancient agreement. Your time is not your own. It belongs to whoever controls your survival. Before agriculture, before civilization, humans controlled their own time. A hunter-gatherer might work 4 hours to gather food, then spend the rest of the day resting, playing, creating, socializing. Time was abundant, personal, free, but agriculture changed everything. Suddenly, food could be stored, surplus could be created, and whoever controlled that surplus controlled people's time. Think about the psychology, the beautiful, terrible psychology of this shift. A farmer in ancient Egypt grows grain, but he doesn't get to keep all of it. The pharaoh's collectors come. They take a portion, supposedly for the common good, for protection, for the gods. And in exchange for this grain, the farmer must give his time, his labor, his days. He wakes when he's told, works where he's told, stops when he's told. His time, the most fundamental resource any human possesses, no longer belongs to him. This agreement was revolutionary. It made civilization possible. It allowed the construction of incredible monuments, the development of writing, mathematics, art. But it came with a cost. The cost was autonomy, freedom, the natural human right to decide, moment by moment, how to spend one's own existence. The builders of the pyramids, contrary to popular belief, weren't slaves. They were workers, citizens, people who believed they were participating in something sacred, but their time wasn't theirs, and they accepted this. They internalized this agreement, because the alternative was starvation, exile, death. This is how agreements become invisible, how they become natural. When the alternative is unthinkable, the agreement becomes reality itself. Now, breathe deeply and recognize this pattern in your own life. You sell your time, perhaps 8 hours a day, perhaps more. During those hours, you do what you're told. You go where you're told. You produce what you're told to produce. And in exchange, you receive money, which you use to ensure your survival, your comfort, your security. The structure is identical to ancient Egypt, only the aesthetics have changed. We don't call it tribute to the pharaoh. We call it earning a salary. We don't call it forced labor, we call it employment. But the agreement remains. Your time belongs to someone else, and in exchange, you get to survive. Most people never question this, never even see it, because the agreement is so fundamental, so deeply embedded that it seems like nature itself. But it's not nature. It's an agreement, one made thousands of years ago, one that still controls your daily life, your weekly schedule, your annual calendar. A thought experiment, 1 week of complete freedom. Here's what I want you to imagine. Really imagine. Feel it completely. Next Monday, you wake up and you have 7 days, 1 full week, where your time is completely yours. No obligations, no deadlines, no expectations. No one to answer to. You don't need to work. Money isn't a concern for this week. Survival is guaranteed. You simply have 168 hours to allocate however you choose. What would you do? And be honest. Brutally honest. Because this reveals everything about your relationship with time, with freedom, with yourself. The first day, Monday, you'd probably feel euphoric, liberated, excited. You might sleep in. The luxury of waking naturally, without an alarm, without urgency. You might do all the things you've been putting off. Read that book, start that project, go for that long walk. This feels amazing. This is what freedom tastes like. But notice something, even on this first day, you're still operating within structures. You're still doing things, accomplishing things, measuring your time against some internal standard of productivity. The second day, Tuesday, things start to get interesting. The initial euphoria fades a bit, and you're faced with a harder question. What now? Without external structure, without deadlines imposed by others, without the framework of work. How do you decide what matters? Some people would thrive here. They'd fill this day with creative pursuits, deep work, meaningful projects they've been dreaming about. But be honest, would you? Or would you start to feel a bit lost, a bit unmoored, a bit uncertain about what actually deserves your time? The third day, Wednesday, the middle of the week. By now, the novelty has worn off completely, and here's where the third ancient agreement reveals its true power. Most people, given complete freedom, given unlimited time, actually start to feel anxious, purposeless, even depressed. Not because they're lazy, not because they lack ambition, but because they've been conditioned their entire lives to have their time structured by others. They've never had to decide from scratch, from nothing, what deserves their hours, their attention, their life. The agreement has done this for them for so long that without it, they feel paralyzed. By the fourth day, Thursday, 2 patterns typically emerge. Either you've figured out how to structure your own time, created your own projects, your own goals, your own sense of purpose, or you've descended into distraction, mindless entertainment, filling time rather than using it. The people who thrive in freedom, they're the ones who can generate their own structure, their own meaning, their own direction. The people who struggle, they're the ones who need external structure, who've never developed the psychological muscles required to direct themselves. The fifth day, Friday, brings a different question. Even if you found meaningful ways to spend your time, even if you're enjoying this freedom, there's probably a subtle anxiety emerging because you know this ends on Sunday. And that knowledge, that awareness of the temporary nature of this freedom, it changes how you experience it. You might start to feel pressure to maximize these days, to accomplish something significant, to prove that given freedom, you can do something worthwhile. This is the agreement reasserting itself, even in its absence, even in its suspension. You've internalized it so deeply that you can't experience freedom without measuring yourself against productivity, against achievement, against worth. The sixth day, Saturday, you might notice something surprising. You might actually miss structure, miss having someone else decide what you should do, miss the clarity that comes from external obligations. Freedom is harder than servitude, because freedom requires you to be responsible, to be self-directed, to choose constantly what matters. Servitude is easier. Someone else makes the decisions. You just execute. You just comply. You just do what you're told. And there's a comfort in that. A safety. A simplicity. The seventh day. Sunday. The last day of freedom. And here's the crucial question. The one that reveals everything. Knowing what you know now. Having experienced a week of complete temporal autonomy. Do you want to go back? Do you want to return to selling your time? To having your schedule controlled? To working on someone else's priorities? To living by someone else's clock? For most people, the honest answer is complicated. There's a part of them that desperately doesn't want to go back, that tasted freedom and found it beautiful. But there's another part, a deeper part perhaps, that actually wants the structure, wants the security, wants someone else to direct their time. Because directing yourself is hard, uncertain, psychologically demanding. The third ancient agreement might be a prison, but it's a comfortable prison, a familiar prison, a prison that provides structure, meaning, purpose, even if those things are imposed rather than chosen. The tool, reclaiming your time strategically. Now, here's how you use this ancient agreement as a tool, rather than being controlled by it. First principle. Recognize that time is the only truly scarce resource. Money can be earned back. Relationships can be rebuilt. Skills can be relearned. But time, once spent, is gone forever. Every hour you sell, every minute you give to someone else's priorities, is an hour you'll never get back. This isn't meant to create anxiety. It's meant to create clarity. When you truly internalize that your time is finite, limited, irreplaceable, you start making different choices. Second principle, understand the trade you're making when you sell your time. You're trading the most valuable thing you possess for money. This trade might be necessary. It might be strategic. It might be the best option available, but it should be conscious, deliberate, clear-eyed. Most people make this trade unconsciously. They fall into jobs, stay in them out of inertia, never really question whether the trade is worth it. You, as an ambitious person, need to constantly evaluate this trade. Are you getting fair value for your time? Is the money you're earning worth the life you're not living? Are there better trades available, different arrangements, alternative structures? Third principle, create time sovereignty gradually. Very few people can go from complete time servitude to complete time freedom in one jump. The financial requirements are too high. The psychological adjustment is too difficult. The practical realities are too complex. But you can create degrees of sovereignty, incremental freedom, gradual autonomy. Start by owning your non-work hours completely. Don't let work bleed into them. Don't check email. Don't think about problems. Don't sacrifice personal time to prove dedication. Your non-work hours are yours. Guard them fiercely. Then, find ways to own pieces of your work time. Negotiate remote work, flexible hours, results-based evaluation rather than time-based. Every inch of autonomy you gain is an inch of life you reclaim. Then, build income sources that aren't time-dependent. investments, royalties, businesses that run without you, systems that generate value while you sleep. This is the ultimate goal, to decouple your income from your time so that your time can truly be yours. Fourth principle, learn to structure your own time. This is the skill most people never develop, because the agreement has always done it for them. But if you want genuine freedom, you need to become your own boss, your own taskmaster, your own director. This means developing systems, creating routines, building habits that generate productivity without external pressure. It means learning to say no to distractions, to resist entropy, to maintain focus when no one is watching. It means developing intrinsic motivation, internal standards, self-imposed discipline. This is hard, harder than following someone else's structure, but it's essential if you want to escape the third ancient agreement. Fifth principle, and this is crucial, understand that complete freedom isn't the goal. The goal isn't to never have obligations, never have commitments, never have structure. The goal is to choose your obligations, to select your commitments, to design your structure. There's a massive difference between having your time controlled by someone else's agenda and having your time structured by your own chosen commitments. One is servitude, the other is autonomy. One depletes you, the other fulfills you. One makes you smaller, the other makes you larger. The most successful people, the most powerful people, the most impactful people, they don't have free time in the sense of unstructured emptiness. They have committed time. Time allocated to purposes they've chosen, projects they've initiated, visions they're building. But it's their choice, their structure, their life. This is the mastery of the third ancient agreement. Not escaping time, but owning it. Not avoiding structure, but creating it. Not rejecting commitment, but choosing it. The ancient Egyptians created a system where the pharaoh owned everyone's time, controlled everyone's days, directed everyone's labor. That system still exists, in different forms, with different names. Your employer owns your time for 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours a day. Your obligations own your time. Family, friends, responsibilities, debts. Your addictions own your time. Social media, television, distractions, escapes. All of these, taking pieces of your life, pieces you'll never get back. But here's the truth, the liberating truth. You can reclaim your time, not all at once, not easily, not without cost, but incrementally, strategically, deliberately. You can make better trades, negotiate better terms, build better systems. You can increase your sovereignty, expand your autonomy, enlarge your freedom, and eventually, if you're skillful enough, patient enough, strategic enough, you can reach a point where your time is predominantly yours, not completely. That's probably impossible while living in society. But predominantly, mostly, primarily, and that's enough. That's victory. That's freedom. As you drift toward sleep, ask yourself, how much of your time is truly yours? How much is sold? How much is obligated? How much is wasted? And what would it take? What trades? What changes? What strategies to reclaim one more hour, one more day, one more year? The third ancient agreement says your time belongs to someone else, but agreements can be renegotiated, and your time, your life, your existence is worth fighting for. The fourth agreement, knowledge must be controlled. Our journey continues to ancient China. During the Qin dynasty, around 200 years before the Common Era, the Emperor Qin Shi Huang has just unified China, creating the first truly centralized state. And he faces a problem that every ruler in every age must solve. How do you control millions of people across vast distances when you can't watch them all? The answer? Control what they know. Control what they think. Control what they believe is possible. This is the fourth ancient agreement. Knowledge belongs to those in power, and will be distributed or withheld according to their interests. Emperor Qin Shi Huang understood something profound, something that ambitious people today must grasp. Ideas are more powerful than armies. A single idea, spread through a population, can topple empires, can revolutionize societies, can change the course of human history. So what did he do? He burned books, hundreds of thousands of scrolls containing philosophy, history, poetry, alternative ways of thinking. He buried scholars alive. Those who preserved dangerous knowledge, who taught people to question, to think independently. This seems barbaric, brutal, insane. But from the emperor's perspective, from the perspective of maintaining control, it was perfectly logical. If people only know what you teach them, if their imagination is bounded by the information you provide, they cannot conceive of alternatives. They cannot imagine different systems, different rulers, different agreements. Think about the psychology of this. As you drift into deeper relaxation, a young person in Qin Dynasty China grows up learning only approved texts, only sanctioned history, only permitted ideas. To them, the emperor's rule seems natural, inevitable, the only way society could possibly function, not because they're stupid, not because they lack intelligence or insight, but because they lack the raw materials, the knowledge, the alternative frameworks needed to imagine something different. This is the power of controlling knowledge. It controls imagination itself. Fast forward through history, and you see this pattern repeated endlessly. The Catholic Church, controlling literacy, keeping the Bible in Latin, ensuring that only priests could access sacred knowledge. Colonial powers, preventing education in colonized territories, keeping populations ignorant, dependent, controllable. Authoritarian regimes, controlling media, banning books, restricting internet access. The method changes, but the agreement remains. Those in power decide what you're allowed to know. Now, here's where this becomes fascinating and relevant to you. Right now, in the modern world, you might think, but I have access to everything. The internet exists. Information is free. And yes, technically, information is more accessible than ever in human history. But access to information and access to knowledge are not the same thing. Knowledge requires context, synthesis, understanding, wisdom, and in the modern world, those in power don't restrict information, they flood you with it. They bury truth under an avalanche of noise, distraction, confusion, contradiction. You can access everything. But how do you know what matters? How do you separate signal from noise, truth from manipulation, genuine insight from sophisticated propaganda? The fourth agreement has evolved. It's become more subtle, more psychological. In ancient China, they controlled knowledge by limiting it. Today, they control knowledge by overwhelming you, by making it impossible to process, to integrate, to truly understand. You're not forbidden from learning. You're prevented from learning by having too many options, too many voices, too many competing narratives, and the result is the same. Most people remain intellectually controllable, not through ignorance, but through confusion. A thought experiment. The information test. Let me give you a challenge. Right now, as you lie here in comfort, I'm going to ask you 3 questions. Questions that test how well you actually understand the world, despite having access to infinite information. Question 1. How does money actually work? Not just how to use it, not just how to spend it or save it, but fundamentally, systemically. How is money created? Who controls that creation? What gives it value? How does monetary policy actually shape the economy? Most people can't answer this. They use money every day. Their entire life revolves around it, but they don't understand the fundamental mechanisms. Why? Because the knowledge is available, easily available, but it's buried under complexity, technical jargon, deliberately obscure explanations. It's not forbidden knowledge. It's just knowledge that requires work, focus, synthesis to truly grasp. And most people, despite having access, never do that work. so they remain controllable through financial mechanisms they don't understand. Question 2. How do the powerful actually maintain power? Not the obvious answer, not wealth or connections, but specifically, mechanically. What systems, what institutions, what networks, what agreements allow a tiny minority to control the majority? Again, disinformation exists, you could find it, but it requires reading history, understanding economics, studying political science, connecting dots across disciplines. It requires time, effort, intellectual labor, and the system is designed to make sure you're too busy, too distracted, too entertained to do that work. So the mechanisms of power remain obscure, hidden not through restriction, but through complexity. Question 3. What is true about the world? This is the hardest question, the most important question on any significant issue, political, scientific, historical, economic. There are competing narratives, conflicting sources, passionate advocates on every side. How do you know, really know, what's actually true? Most people, if they're honest, don't know. They have opinions. They have things they've heard that sound plausible. But certainty, genuine understanding, that's rare, because achieving it requires not just access to information, but the skills to evaluate information, to detect bias, to recognize propaganda, to think critically, to resist manipulation. These skills aren't taught, not really, not systematically, because teaching them would make populations ungovernable. So instead, we're given access to everything, and understanding of nothing. The fourth agreement, perfectly executed, invisibly, in the age of information, the tool, building true knowledge. Here's how you break free from the fourth ancient agreement. How you transform information access into actual knowledge, into genuine understanding, into power. First tool, develop information filters. You cannot process everything, you cannot read everything, you cannot know everything. Trying to do so is the trap, the way the modern version of this agreement maintains control. Instead, you need filters, systems for deciding what deserves your attention and what doesn't. This means identifying the sources that consistently provide signal rather than noise, not the sources that confirm your biases, not the sources that make you feel good, but the sources that challenge you, that provide evidence, that reason carefully, that admit uncertainty when appropriate. This means developing a framework for evaluating new information. Does this source have an obvious agenda? Does this claim have supporting evidence? Does this explanation account for complexity? Or does it oversimplify? Is this designed to inform or to manipulate? These questions, applied consistently, filter out enormous amounts of noise. Second tool, pursue depth over breadth. The modern information environment encourages surface-level engagement with everything, clicking through headlines, scrolling through summaries, never diving deep into anything. This creates the illusion of knowledge, the feeling of being informed while actually maintaining ignorance. Real knowledge requires depth, requires spending serious time, serious effort on serious subjects. Pick a domain that matters to you, to your goals, to your understanding of power. Then, don't just read an article about it. Read a book. Read 10 books. Read primary sources. Read critics and defenders. Spend 6 months, a year, really understanding something. This seems inefficient. This seems like you're missing out on everything else. But it's the opposite. Deep knowledge in one domain teaches you how knowledge works, how systems function, how to think rigorously, and those skills transfer, making you better at understanding everything else. Third tool, connect knowledge across domains. The fourth agreement relies on specialization, on keeping knowledge siloed, isolated, compartmentalized. Economists understand economics, but not history. Politicians understand politics, but not psychology. Technologists understand technology, but not sociology. This compartmentalization prevents people from seeing patterns, from connecting systems, from understanding how power actually operates across domains. You, as an ambitious person seeking real knowledge, need to break these silos. Learn history and economics and psychology and politics and technology. Not expert level in each, but enough to see connections, to recognize patterns, to understand systems, because real power, real control operates at the intersections where domains meet, where most people don't look. Fourth tool, question your own knowledge. This is the hardest tool, the most humbling tool, but the most important. Most of what you don't actually know. You believe, you've been told, you've accepted, but you haven't verified, you haven't understood, you haven't truly integrated. This is okay. This is normal. This is the human condition. But ambitious people seeking genuine power, need to be honest about this. Regularly audit your beliefs, your assumptions, your knowledge. Ask, do I actually know this? Or do I just believe this? What evidence do I have? What alternative explanations exist? What might I be missing? This process is uncomfortable. It reveals how little you actually know, how much you've simply accepted. But it's also liberating, because once you acknowledge what you don't know, you can actually begin to know it. Fifth tool, and this is critical. Teach what you learn. Knowledge that stays in your head is weak, incomplete, unstable. Knowledge that you can explain to others, that you can teach, that you can defend against questions, that's real knowledge. This is why teaching is so powerful. It forces clarity. It exposes gaps. It requires deep understanding. So, as you learn, find ways to teach. Write about it. Speak about it. Explain it to friends. Create content. Share insights. Not to show off, not to appear smart, but to solidify your own understanding, to test your knowledge, to make it real. This transforms information into knowledge, into power, into genuine understanding. The fourth ancient agreement says, knowledge belongs to those in power, but knowledge, real knowledge, deep understanding, critical thinking, that can be claimed by anyone willing to do the work. The work is hard, harder than most people want to do. It requires time, focus, discipline, humility, but the payoff is extraordinary because knowledge, genuine knowledge, is power. Not the power to control others, although it can provide that, but the power to see clearly, to think independently, to resist manipulation, to make better decisions, to shape your own life according to truth rather than propaganda. This is the tool. This is how you break free, not by accessing more information, but by building genuine understanding, not by knowing everything, but by knowing some things deeply, not by accepting what you're told, but by questioning everything, including yourself. The agreement wants you confused, overwhelmed, uncertain. Knowledge makes you clear, focused, confident, and that clarity, that confidence, that understanding, that's dangerous to power, which is exactly why you should pursue it. As you settle into sleep, consider this. What do you think you know? That you actually don't? What would change if you truly understood the systems that shape your life? And what knowledge, what deep understanding would give you the power to build the life, the career, the impact you actually want? The fourth agreement has controlled humanity for thousands of years. But you, right now, in the age of information, have an opportunity no previous generation had. The opportunity to know, truly know, despite the noise, despite the confusion, despite the manipulation. All it requires is deciding that truth matters more than comfort, that understanding matters more than opinions, that knowledge matters more than information. Make that decision. Do that work. Claim that power. And the fourth ancient agreement loses its grip, not completely, not easily, but enough. Enough to see clearly, enough to think independently, enough to be free. The fifth agreement, your identity belongs to the group. Let us travel now to ancient Rome at the height of its power. The Colosseum stands magnificent, deadly, a monument to entertainment and to something deeper. Inside, thousands gather, Citizens from every level of society, packed together, watching gladiators fight, watching criminals executed, watching spectacles of violence and skill. And in this watching, something remarkable happens. Individual identities dissolve, merge, become something collective. They are no longer Marcus the baker, or Julia the merchant's wife, or Gaius the soldier. They are Romans. They think as Romans, feel as Romans, act as Romans. This is the fifth ancient agreement. Your individual identity is secondary. Your group identity is primary. And the group's survival, its glory, its power, matters more than your personal desires. Before cities, before empires, humans lived in small tribes. And yes, tribal identity mattered. But tribal identity was intimate, personal, face-to-face. You knew everyone in your tribe. They knew you. Your identity was complex, multifaceted, real. But empires require something different, something more abstract, more powerful. They require millions of people who will never meet each other to identify as a single entity, to sacrifice for that entity, to kill for it, to die for it. How do you create this? The Romans understood. You create shared symbols, shared rituals, shared enemies, shared glory. The Colosseum wasn't just entertainment, it was identity formation. When Romans watched gladiators fight, they weren't just watching combat, they were participating in a ritual that said, "This is who we are. This is what we value. This is our power." When they watched barbarians defeated, criminals punished, exotic animals slaughtered, they were learning. We are civilized, we are strong, we are superior, we are Roman. Think about the psychology of this. As your breathing deepens, as you relax further, a poor Roman citizen, living in a cramped apartment, working a menial job, barely surviving, sits in the Colosseum. And for a few hours, he is not poor. He is Roman, part of the greatest civilization on earth, connected to power, to glory, to conquest. His individual suffering becomes bearable because his group identity gives him pride, purpose, meaning. This is brilliant and deeply manipulative because once your identity is tied to the group controls you. If your worth comes from being Roman, then you'll do anything to remain Roman, to prove your Romanness, to defend Roman interests. You'll fight in wars that don't benefit you personally, pay taxes that impoverish you, follow rules that restrict your freedom, all because your sense of self, your identity, requires it. The agreement is invisible, but total. You are not primarily an individual, you are a member of the group, and the group's needs supersede your own. Fast forward to modernity, and this agreement hasn't weakened, it's multiplied. You're not just a person, you're American, British, Chinese, Indian. You're liberal, conservative, progressive, traditional. You're a professional, working class elite. You're a sports fan, a brand loyalist, a community member. Each identity comes with agreements, with expectations, with behavioral scripts, and these identities control you more than you realize. They determine who you trust, who you fear, who you consider us versus them. They shape your opinions, your values, even your perception of reality itself. Two people can witness the same event and see completely different things because their group identities provide different interpretive frameworks. This is the power of the fifth agreement. It controls not just behavior, but perception, thought, reality itself. A thought experiment. The identity stripping exercise now. I want you to do something unusual, something that might feel uncomfortable. I want you to imagine that tomorrow morning you wake up and every group identity you have is gone, completely erased, removed, deleted. Your nationality, gone. You're not American or British or Indian or Chinese anymore. Your political affiliation, gone. You're not liberal or conservative or progressive or traditional. Your professional identity, gone. You're not a doctor or lawyer or entrepreneur or artist. Your educational background, gone. Doesn't matter where you went to school or what degrees you have. Your socioeconomic status, gone. You're neither rich nor poor, neither privileged nor disadvantaged. Your race, your ethnicity, your religion, your gender identity. All the categories that society uses to classify you, gone. You are just you, a human being with thoughts, feelings, capabilities, desires, fears, nothing more, nothing less. Now, stay with this. Really feel it. What happens first is probably panic, because we've built our entire sense of self on these group identities. They tell us who we are, what we believe, how we should act, what we should want. Without them, there's a terrifying void. Who are you if you're not these things? What do you believe? If not what your groups tell you to believe, what do you value? If not what your groups value? This panic, this disorientation, this is the fifth ancient agreement revealing its power. You've outsourced your identity to groups, and now, without them, you feel lost. But stay with it. Push through the panic. What emerges on the other side is something interesting. Certain things remain, certain core aspects of yourself that existed before the group identities that are dependent on them. Maybe you're curious, genuinely curious about how things work. Maybe you're kind, naturally compassionate toward other beings. Maybe you're ambitious, driven to build, to create, to achieve. Maybe you're analytical. You see patterns. You think systematically. You solve problems. These things, these core traits, they're yours. Not given by groups, not determined by categories, not borrowed from collective identities. They're genuinely, authentically, individually yours. Now here's where it gets really interesting. With all your group identities stripped away, what do you actually think? Take a controversial issue. Any issue where your group identity normally determines your position. Without that identity, without the need to signal group membership, without the fear of group rejection, what do you actually believe? Be honest, brutally honest. On many issues, you probably discover you don't actually have a strong opinion. You thought you did, but it was really just your group's opinion that you'd adopted to maintain belonging. On some issues, you might discover your actual opinion is different from your group's position, maybe even the opposite, but you never expressed it, never even fully acknowledged it to yourself, because the cost of diverging from the group was too high. And here's the most revealing part. Without group identities, who do you actually trust? Who do you actually fear? Who do you actually see as fundamentally similar to you? And who is fundamentally different for most people? These categories shift dramatically when group identities are removed. People you were taught to distrust suddenly seem reasonable, relatable, human. People you were taught to trust suddenly seem questionable, biased, perhaps even manipulative. The lines between us and them, those sharp, clear, obvious lines, they blur, they shift, they sometimes disappear entirely. And what you're left with is a more complex, more nuanced, more accurate view of reality, not filtered through group narratives, not shaped by collective identities. Just what's actually there, the tool, strategic identity management. Now, here's the practical reality. You cannot actually strip away all group identities. Not in the real world, not while living in society. Group identities are necessary, useful, powerful. They provide belonging, community, shared meaning, collective action. The problem isn't having group identities. The problem is being controlled by them, unconsciously, automatically, completely. So here's how you use the fifth ancient agreement as a tool, rather than being used by it. First principle. Hold your group identities lightly. This means you can claim membership in groups, can participate in group activities, can share group goals, but you recognize, always, that these identities are chosen, constructed, contingent. You're not essentially, fundamentally, unchangeably defined by these groups. You chose to affiliate, and you could choose to disaffiliate if the group no longer serves you, or if the group demands things that violate your core values. Most people don't realize this. They experience group identity as destiny, as nature, as unchangeable truth. But it's not. It's choice. and maintaining awareness of that choice creates freedom. Second principle, diversify your group identities. The most dangerous situation is when one group identity dominates everything. When your entire sense of self, your entire social network, your entire worldview comes from one group, because then that group has total control. Leaving would mean losing everything, so you can't leave, can't question, can't diverge. Instead, maintain multiple group identities that sometimes overlap, sometimes conflict, sometimes pull in different directions. Be part of professional groups, social groups, intellectual groups, recreational groups, ideological groups, and make sure these groups aren't all aligned, aren't all pulling the same direction. This creates tension. Yes, sometimes uncomfortable tension, but it also creates freedom, because no single group can totally control you. When you have competing loyalties, competing perspectives, competing identities. Third principle, distinguish between groups that enhance you and groups that diminish you. Some groups make you better. They challenge you, they raise your standards, they expose you to excellence, they push you to grow. Being part of these groups, claiming these identities. This is valuable, this is strategic, this serves your ambitions. Other groups make you worse. They encourage your worst tendencies, they lower your standards, they reward mediocrity, they keep you small. These groups might feel comfortable, might provide belonging, might stroke your ego, but they're toxic, they're limiting, they're holding you back, and you need to recognize this. Need to be honest about it. Need to have the courage to distance yourself, even if it's lonely, even if it's hard, even if the group punishes you for leaving. Your individual growth, your individual potential, your individual becoming, that matters more than group belonging. Fourth principle, use group identity strategically for specific purposes. In certain contexts, claiming certain group identities gives you access, gives you credibility. Professional identities open doors. Social identities create connections. Ideological identities signal allegiance. Ambitious people understand this. They use group identities as tools, as strategic assets. But they don't confuse the tool with the self. They don't believe their own performance. Don't internalize the role. Don't mistake the identity they're projecting for who they actually are. This might sound manipulative, might sound inauthentic, but consider, actors play roles without becoming the characters. Diplomats represent countries without believing they are the country. Professionals adopt professional personas without losing their personal selves. This is sophisticated. This is strategic. This is how you navigate complex social systems without being consumed by them. Fifth principle, protect your individual core beneath all group identities, beneath all social roles, beneath all collective affiliations. There is you, your core, your essence, your genuine individual self. This part of you must remain protected, must remain yours, not shared with groups, not sacrificed for belonging, not compromised for acceptance. This is non-negotiable, because if you lose this, if you completely dissolve into group identities, if there's no individual core remaining, then you're not a person anymore. You're just a collection of group memberships, a bundle of collective scripts, a hollow performance of borrowed identities, and you can never be powerful, never be free, never be genuinely ambitious if there's no you at the center. So maintain that core fiercely, jealously, protectively. Let groups have access to parts of you. Let them influence certain decisions. Let them shape certain behaviors. But never, never let them have all of you. The deeper tool, and this is advanced, this is for truly ambitious people. Learn to create group identities rather than just joining them. This is the ultimate mastery of the fifth agreement. Most people join existing groups, adopt existing identities, play by existing rules. But powerful people, influential people, people who shape culture and society, they create new groups, define new identities, establish new rules. They say, Here's a new way to think about ourselves. Here's a new category. Here's a new identity that didn't exist before. And if they're persuasive enough, strategic enough, compelling enough, people adopt this new identity. And the creator, the founder, the person who defined the identity, they have enormous influence over everyone who claims it. This is how movements start, how brands build loyalty, how leaders create followings. Not by joining existing tribes, but by defining new ones. This requires vision, requires courage, requires the ability to articulate an identity that resonates with people's deeper needs. But if you can do it, if you can create a group identity that people want to claim, you've mastered the fifth ancient agreement completely. You're no longer controlled by it. You're controlling it. You're using it to shape culture, to build power, to create change. As you drift deeper into relaxation, into sleep, consider this. What group identities do you claim right now? Which ones enhance you? Which ones diminish you? Which ones you chose consciously? Which ones you inherited unconsciously? And beneath all of them, Morius of collective identity. Who are you, really? What remains when everything borrowed is stripped away? That core, that essence, that genuine individual self. That's what matters most. That's what you must protect, develop, express. The fifth ancient agreement says your identity belongs to the group, but your deepest identity, your truest self, that belongs to you alone. Guard it, know it, live from it, and use group identities as tools, as strategic assets, as means to your ends. But never, never confuse them with who you actually are. The Romans created massive group identity, created empire, created civilization. But the empire fell. The identity dissolved. The groups disbanded. What remains, what endures, is individual human potential, individual human creativity, individual human spirit. That's what you are, beneath all the layers, beneath all the groups, beneath all the identities. A singular, unrepeatable, infinitely valuable individual consciousness. Everything else is just clothing you wear for the occasion. Remember that as you sleep, as you dream, as you prepare for tomorrow. You are not your groups. You are not your categories. You are not your labels. You are you, and that is enough. You've journeyed with me now through 5 ancient agreements, 5 invisible forces that shape your life, the hierarchy that demands obedience, the wealth that measures worth, the time that belongs to others, the knowledge that's controlled, the identity that dissolves into groups. But our journey is not complete. 4 more agreements remain. 4 more ancient patterns. 4 more tools for you to master. If these insights are opening your eyes, please subscribe to this channel now, because in part 2, we'll discover the remaining agreements, the ones that control your relationship with time itself, with pain and pleasure, with stories, and with death. These final 4, they're the deepest, the most transformative. Subscribe now, rest well, and when you're ready, part 2 awaits. Until then, sleep deeply and prepare yourself, for what comes next goes even deeper. Good night for now.